name is Pedro Martinez, an orphan at St. Christopher's. Moved there in 1847, 6 years ago, but it's not an easy thing growing up as someone that nobody wants. There are others who have been here most of their lives, including myself. I'm okay with not being wanted. I can get by in the world, but the place I stay in is often the target of violence. I don't know why they don't like us. We never hurt anyone. We take care of ourselves pretty well, but that all seemed to change with the arrival of Padre Lucius Infernestiorne. He had come in as a newbie, freshly out of the seminary, and he started to implement changes. The changes weren't bad, not at all. Sure, he made us work on a garden and a farm he had set up to grow our own food. He even had a couple of goats for milk. He often told us that he knew our doing this was very valuable. What was even more special was that he often got into the dirt with us. He wouldn't use it as a punishment. In fact, we were often spared from that because we didn't do anything wrong. He was strict, just someone who believed that honest work did more for us than anything else. He also tried to help out those of us who had been allowed to grow older as orphans, so he wasn't a bad person. He often told prospective parents the good things about adopting someone who'd already gotten past the stages of being a teenager and had matured along the way. But those who wanted to shut us down didn't stay quiet. There are many who accuse us for petty crimes in town, as if the epithet of orphan made us automatically bad. There are also many who suggested that us older orphans had done other things that were wrong, including the accusation that one of us had gotten 3 teenage girls pregnant. I never knew why they would think things like that. We weren't exactly the best, but we tried to keep out of trouble. But for some reason, one night, they determined that one of us had burned a house down with children trapped inside. When somebody accused us, one of them pointed to me and said they knew it was I that set the fire. Problem was, I had not left the orphanage on that night. I had been inside with a bit of an illness. But they kept saying it was that Pedro boy. But nobody wanted. The accusation flew through the town that I must be some kind of wild child when the second fire was set. Many were convinced on the third night I was not only guilty of arson, but also murder. And one night, they'd had enough. The townfolk came to the door of the orphanage with torches and guns, said that unless I turned myself over to them, they'd burn the place to the ground. I was about to do so when Padre Lucius put a hand on my shoulder. "Do not worry, Pedro," he said. "You do not have to go. I will go and convince them of your innocence." He went out there, although I thought he was crazy. He was going out to an angry mob that only wanted blood without a weapon except for his faith. Although I couldn't hear him, I watched as the mob seemed to listen to him very carefully. Then someone decided to open fire with a flintlock that they had. That was when it turned into something else. This flame seemed to burst from in front of the church, a flame that seemed to be alive. Many of the town people screamed in terror as something seemed to direct a blast of fire at them. Then another, then another. I watched as one of these fireballs hit a particularly nasty person, seeing him flipping many times over as the rest of them saw it and fled, no doubt in terror. I watched as the padre came out to check on the man, the flame thing disappearing as he picked him up and carried him inside. One of the sisters came to the aid. "I will take care of him, Padre," she says. "We need you to try and assure us. We are all scared right now." The padre came to us, telling us that the villagers would no longer bother us and that they would not dare make another false accusation. I had seen nothing, only the fireballs, and was convinced that, with whatever had happened, the padre was right. It was a few minutes later when the sister came and whispered into the padre's ear something that I was close enough to hear. "We can do nothing for him," she says. "I don't think he will last. He has to see you, I think for the last rites." I had wanted to find out what happened myself. I didn't see anything, but the villagers had, and it was something that I was very curious about. I followed Padre Lucius to the injured man and could hear the wheezing of him breathing as I wanted to know what he would say. As I waited at the doorway, I could smell burnt flesh. I could hear him struggling against what was going to happen. Padre spoke. "Do you wish last rites, my son?" The man opened his eyes, looked at the padre, and almost gasped in terror. "What would you like me to do?" the padre says. He wheezed out only a few words burned into my mind as long as I have lived. "Padre El Diablo, will you be replaced by your master in hell?"
Again. Chloe was an 8-year-old who had this imaginary friend since she was 5. But it was only lately that Evelyn seemed to be getting information from somewhere. Her daughter's imaginary friend, Oscar, had told Chloe things that no child should ever know, and also told her things that were surprisingly accurate. Such things as a friend's divorce, a fire starting in a house 4 doors down, and other things began to unnerve her, so Evelyn put the rule down. Chloe was to have no more imaginary friends. only friends that were real. Chloe protested, of course, so Evelyn kept the rule fast. Imaginary friends were okay for some children, especially those who were awkward, but Oscar seemed to still be there, even when Evelyn arranged some playdates and some interaction with other children. She began to wonder if her daughter was mentally ill. And then the weirdness started. At first, small things kept disappearing from their places and ended up in Chloe's bedroom, in the tank of the toilet, and even with some more needed objects set to be stepped on by Evelyn in the morning. Evelyn was sure Chloe was behind the pranks, but some of the things were either too high or in places that Chloe could otherwise not reach. Evelyn got very strict with her daughter, but then other things started to happen. Her computer was suddenly shut down, nothing done by Evelyn, but the plug would be pulled out of the power strip. The TV would suddenly turn on or change channels, but the most unnerving of all were of the faucets. Always closed tightly, suddenly turning on without warning. That was when Chloe told her Oscar was trying to get her to let Chloe play again. At first, Evelyn was sure it was Chloe that was responsible, but it seemed as if Oscar was trying to send a message. Evelyn had heard of children talking to ghosts as imaginary friends, but she didn't think it could be real. Still, was Chloe talking to a spirit? The best thing, she decided, was to try and make Oscar feel like he wasn't needed or wanted there. This was why Chloe was mad again. "If you don't listen, Mommy, Oscar will get even more angry." Evelyn tried to soothe her again. "Sweetie, Oscar isn't real. You made him up." Chloe's voice sounded hollow. "No, Mommy, I didn't." Evelyn looked at her daughter. "Oscar's not welcome here." Chloe's eyes actually became pleading. "Please, Mommy, you have to let him stay. It'll only get worse if you don't." Evelyn had enough. "Chloe, Oscar has to leave. There's no other option. Now go to bed." Chloe actually shivered as she looked to one side. "Mommy, please." Evelyn didn't argue, didn't even speak. She just pointed to Chloe's bedroom and watched her as she got ready for bed quietly. It made her wonder what hold Oscar had on her daughter as the child went to bed, softly sobbing as if she was afraid of getting caught with something. It was only after Evelyn was certain Chloe was asleep when she went to the fridge to grab a beer. "That won't help you, Mommy." Evelyn spun, expecting to see her daughter, but the voice wasn't hers. It echoed and sounded both an octave too high and too low at the same time. There was nobody behind her, and the voice suddenly changed direction. "You should have let me back in with your daughter, Mommy." Evelyn spun again. Was she hearing things? The voice actually laughed. "What's the matter? Can't have a little competition for your daughter's affection?" Evelyn knew she was lying as she spoke with a voice that contradicted her statement. "Whatever you are, I'm not afraid." The voice grew serious. "You know who I am." Evelyn did. She felt it in her heart. A coldness grabbed hold that she didn't want to let go. "Oscar?" The voice spoke behind her again, and Evelyn, for the first time, felt something on her back. "You see, you're not stupid, at least not stupid enough to pretend I'm not here. You are stupid, though, to keep me from Chloe." The thing felt like it was climbing up her back, as if to whisper in her ear. "Chloe agreed to keep me a secret. If I was the only one she could play with, it's not hard to get it. She did it to protect you." The words hit Evelyn hard. Oscar felt a little under 30 pounds, almost felt like himself, but Evelyn had to try and get a firm footing. "What do you want with my daughter?" Sharp claws felt like they were digging into her back and shoulders as Oscar grasped onto her. "I want nothing to do with Chloe. She tried to protect you from me." That made Evelyn gasp. As she struggled to find the courage to do what she needed to do as much as she dreaded the prospect, she moved to her own room, unsure of what to expect. "What do you want with me?" She managed to turn on the lights and move to the mirror, expecting to see nothing. Oscar had proven he was real and had her wondering about her own sanity, but Oscar was supposed to be a ghost. She didn't know any that had the sharp claws she felt in her sides and shoulders, or that had the ability to speak out loud, let alone in a voice she was sure she'd only heard in her nightmares. What was over her shoulder in the mirror was far worse. As her insides felt like they were icing over, she gazed at the other image, one that seemed reptilian and avian at the same time, with other things mixed in. It looked as if someone had taken the worst parts of several creatures and glued them together, creating something that seemed as if it was born in the depths of hell, something so twisted she knew right away she'd never sleep again for fear that something like this would be behind her eyelids. Oscar laughed with a mouth that was too wide, an otherwise featureless face and a pair of eyes that looked as if they could see everything at once. It tightened its grip, digging the claws, or were they barbs, into her skin as he answered her question. "What do I want, Evelyn?" "You." When Chloe woke up the next morning, she could tell her mother had talked to Oscar. The eyes seemed vacant as she was just moving on her own.
"Mommy, are you okay?"
The eerie voice came from her mother's mouth.
"She's no longer here,
I had
Chloe."
known Luke Davidson for almost 20
The voice
years.
was one
He's
she
the
knew
kind
very
of guy
well.
that seemed to have
It was
everything handed
The
to
one
him.
of her first
A real
cousins,
lucky SOB.
Oscar.
He always had the best things money could buy, but all that changed recently. Our business was trying to partner with a similar business in Africa, in Swaziland to be precise. Luke and I, as well as our wives, had finished up things early, and we decided to make it into a real vacation. Swaziland wasn't like home, not nice and straight, but it was very beautiful. There was one cave, one we decided to visit, that was considered sacred. When we finished with our business deal, we visited the cave with our wives. It seemed to be an ancient shrine for some deity represented by a lion. We thought it was pretty cool, and Luke thought he'd be sneaky and trying to sneak a souvenir from the cave. Just a simple rock. Not so simple as it turned out. Almost the moment we got back, things changed. Luke's health took a turn for the worst. His immune system seemed to completely shut down. He'd still come into work, but he'd have to leave early because he was hacking and coughing so much. Then word came down the line that his wife had started to see other men. But before he could get a divorce, she managed to get everything from him. He blamed the rock from the cave. It made sense to me. It all happened because he stole the rock from something sacred. There had been reports of stolen souvenirs from other places bringing bad luck, so it seemed to be the same here. I suggested that Luke mail the rock back to our partners in Swaziland with the instruction to return it to the cave. The moment he did that, things began to improve. His health returned, and everything else also seemed to improve until the night of the phone call. He was driving his new sports car, enjoying it, when I had to call him. "Hey, Luke."
"Hey, buddy."
"Just got a response from Swaziland. They're saying that returning the stolen rock won't undo the curse. It only looks like it's undone."
He sounded tense. "What do you mean?"
"They say the curse isn't gone. It's still active." I was going to say active, but I was cut off by my friend screaming in terror. The sound of a car completely out of control was followed by something else. Something very familiar. When they found the wreck, Luke's body was all scratched up, but not from the glass exploding in his face. His clothes had distinct patterns, the patterns of the claws of a lion. Fairview, Wyoming had a problem. Somehow, from somewhere unknown, it seemed as if a whole horde of clowns decided to make their presence known. The town never suspected that the trend of people dressing up as clowns in order to get a charge out of scaring people would ever come there. But the clowns were showing up anyway. It started out simply enough. Just like in other places, the unidentified clowns would do things that were bizarre, often carrying lethal weapons but never using them. It seemed as if they simply didn't care that they were scaring people, until the day everything changed. It was bound to happen. Someone saw a clown doing something creepy and opened fire. Truthfully, nobody really cared who did it. A dead clown was a warning to the others not to keep doing what they were doing, but the creepiness didn't end there. When trying to identify the clown, the reality set in. The only way to describe what happened was eerie. He looked incredibly like one of the town's founders from 1848. Any attempt at DNA was met with disappointment and disturbing news. There was no DNA. The clowns weren't zombies. They moved the same as normal people, and there was no sense of death attached to them. And they had never intended to harm anyone, just scare. But that's when things got far worse. Not explaining it any other way, the clowns returned, but this time they weren't staying hiding. They weren't content to remain in the shadows. Instead, they went from house to house, door to door, looking at the windows while the people inside called the police. When they arrived, there were no footprints, nothing to prove there was anything wrong, until they got to one house. Somehow, even with the security system in place, even with the doors and windows locked tight, the family living there was slaughtered. Their bodies were cut to ribbons and their blood sprayed all over the house in gruesome smiley faces. It was only later discovered that the wife and mother was the one that killed the first clown. They decided to get revenge in an eye-opening way. But the clowns didn't seem to be satisfied. The next night, another family, innocent of anything else, was brutally slain in the same manner. The next night, the same. This kept going, even though all the people killed were in secured spaces. It was never known how the clowns got in, but a couple of security cameras showed that there was exactly what happened. The clowns simply slaughtered everyone they ran across, delighting in the mayhem it caused. Julia Travers never believed in ghosts. She didn't want to think the idea of tortured spirits was a good one, and she refused to listen to anything speaking close to demonic. That was until she went to college. It wasn't that the college had a history of hauntings, it was actually the small house she and 3 other girls decided to live in. Although it was old, it meant the rent was cheap, something they all agreed would be a good thing. At first it wasn't much. Keys that were in one place turned up in another. The glasses of one of the girls moved from where she regularly put them to the floor of another room. Food and water would end up somewhere else, and other minor things moved. They had thought they had an unannounced tenant in the building. It had happened before, but a few nights of videotaping showed nobody but the 4 of them. Things began to escalate after a few months. Lights came on when nobody was in the room, and their computers would flip off for no reason, erasing their work and making it impossible to complete what they wanted to. When they tried to read, the lights would flick on and off, making it impossible to do so in their home. Then the knockings and the footsteps started. They called on a paranormal group who brought in all sorts of scientific and historical studies, ultimately finding that the house had been replaced of a place where a coven of witches opened a portal to the next realm. A priest who specialized in exorcisms came in to bless their house and to try and close all the portals. Julia thought it was pretty amusing. Still, the house felt a lot better, almost as if light was suddenly shining in their lives. Things got back to normal for all of them soon after. Julia didn't think anything would happen again. She had just finished with the last of her finals for the semester and was ready for a relaxing evening. Although she was considered an exceptional beauty, she wasn't one to just go out and party. Instead, to relax, she put on a quiet CD, filled her bathtub with her favorite scents and rose petals, lit a scented candle or two, and let the bubbles suds up to enjoy a few quiet moments of letting the warm water relax her entire body. As she let herself sink into the tub, she felt the warmth of the water on her exposed skin, and she took in the warmth and felt her muscles begin to relax. She let her whole body sink in, letting out a sigh of relaxation as she felt everything really untie. She draped her arms on the sides, closing her eyes and letting the muscles and the scents fill her nostrils. She wasn't sure what happened or when, but all she knew was that there wasn't any breaks in her CD. That meant she'd fallen asleep. She knew she felt suddenly cold and that other things began to change. The pleasant scents turned to sickening, and she felt one other thing. She opened her eyes in shock, looked down, and stood up screaming. Her bathwater had turned in its entirety into blood.
Have a very pleasant Halloween. Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe.
And pleasant dreams.